Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down something absolutely mind-blowing. We're looking at an incredibly sophisticated, almost unbelievable framework known as the Aegis Monolith. This is a system specifically designed to take complex, systemic trauma and totally rewire it into two very distinct things: raw, actionable legal power on one hand, and high-fidelity commercial art on the other. It's just a fascinating look at how human resilience can literally be structured, scaled, and weaponized. So, picture this. Imagine being locked in a totally hostile legal dispute with powerful institutions, acting as your own lawyer, all while trying to protect your family's safety and assets. Honestly, most people would just completely collapse from the procedural exhaustion alone. But what if you decided, you know what, I'm not just going to win this war, I'm going to write an 8-volume commercial literary franchise at the exact same time? A standard approach to litigation and art just wouldn't work here. Your brain would literally fry. To understand how this is even possible, here's our quick roadmap. We'll cover the burden of systemic friction, the Aegis Monolith architecture, the Nobly data firewall, AI and lexicon shields, forging dual sovereign outputs, and finally, achieving the sovereign peace. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the burden of systemic friction. 1555. Just let that number sink in for a second. That represents the verified hours of continuous quantum labor the creator executed over a single, grueling 45-day cycle. To put that into perspective, a standard professional might work around 250 hours in that time frame. But this system required an absolutely insane output just to self-represent in a multi-jurisdictional legal war, entirely without court-appointed defenders. And you have to understand the sheer weight of the opposition here. Within the architecture's internal lore, these hostile actors, the institutions and bad faith administrators trying to drain resources, are called the fiduciaries or the syndicate. Trying to fight these predatory forces manually while tracking every single moving piece of a 40-year timeline, that's a guaranteed one-way ticket to cognitive burnout. Which brings us right into Section 2, the Aegis Monolith architecture. To survive that kind of pressure, you have to build something unbreakable. This architecture basically acts as a living, breathing 40-year chronological ledger. It traces the entire journey, from the foundational trauma of systemic neglect at the very bottom, all the way up to absolute sovereignty and commercial success at the top. It's a literal blueprint for taking back control. Now, to stop your psyche from collapsing while navigating all this, the Aegis Monolith strictly divides every piece of incoming data into 3 completely isolated tiers. Tier 1 is the forensic grid. That's the messy stuff, raw, toxic legal evidence. Tier 2 is the creative sanctuary, which is highly insulated and strictly for writing. And Tier 3 is the advocacy wing, which handles all the scheduling, logistics, and protects the core team. Moving on to Section 3, the no-bleed data firewall. This is arguably the most absolutely crucial rule of the entire setup. It's called the no-bleed rule. It is an impenetrable, absolute firewall. It strictly dictates that all the bureaucratic hostility, the nasty legal jargon, the eviction threats, all that medical stress from Tier 1, it must never, ever organically contaminate the creative prose being written over in Tier 2. You can really see the stark contrast here. The forensic grid is sterile, it's hostile, it's loaded with toxic legal data. But the creative sanctuary? That space is protected. It's flowing. It's where cinematic prose gets crafted with total uninhibited freedom. This protocol is basically the ultimate psychological defense mechanism. It guarantees the creator is safe from systemic anxiety and PTSD triggers while they're in the zone. And because of that strict firewall, all that raw trauma from the legal battle doesn't just sit there. It gets safely transformed. It fuels this highly stylized, empowering literary aesthetic known as asphalt gothic. It literally flips victimhood on its head, turning it into a defiant, gritty, sensory noir narrative of survival. Let's look at Section 4, AI and lexicon shields. So, you're probably asking, how does one human being process all of this? Well, they don't do it alone. The creator acts as the master director, delegating the massive cognitive load to a specialized 20-unit AI command staff. Take the data janitor, for instance. It takes a hostile legal document, scrubs away all the toxic emotional friction, and passes only the clean, chronological facts upward. Then units like the Keeper of the Codex and the World Builder take those clean facts and spin them into rich, sensory world building for the books. But what happens when you actually have to interface with the real world, like filing a court document? That's where the double-blind vocabulary comes in. It's an automated translation shield that perfectly converts the manuscript's internal mythic lore into standard, boring legal terminology that a judge can actually rule on. Just look at how this works in practice. Highly poetic internal concepts instantly become cold, actionable legal violations. The archons become the fiduciaries. An erasure strike in the fictional story becomes systemic negligence on paper. Fiduciary conservator time is simply billed as uncompensated caregiver labor. The opposing lawyers have zero clue about the creative lore. They only see the statutes they're being hit with. Now listen to this part closely because it's absolutely brilliant. The system uses a strict name replacement protocol. But here's the kicker. It's not just about everyday privacy. It purposely redacts all real names, addresses, and sensitive information related to any of the legal cases strictly to protect the creator's intellectual property. All the characters in the manuscript are entirely made up. They are archetype aliases, like the master director or the matriarch. So by stripping out the real-world markers, the creator isn't just protecting people. They are fiercely protecting the names and the very intellectual property of the manuscript itself. It's a total shield for the art. Next up, Section 5, Forging Dual Sovereign Outputs. Because the data partitioning is so perfect, the creator successfully forged two massive, completely different outputs at the exact same time. On one side, you have this lethal legal weapon, a 450-page master statutory ledger calculating over $17 million in estimated restitution. And right alongside it, a literary epic, an 8-volume commercial literary franchise. They are creating high art and hard law simultaneously from the exact same timeline. It essentially operates as a perfect frictionless loop. When the opposition launches an attack, the monolith immediately strips that attack of its biological shock. It takes the cold data, builds the legal case for restitution, and then harvests the narrative elements for high art. It's the ultimate sentry system. It never sleeps, it never gets tired of the paperwork, it's simply processing the truth. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, Achieving the Sovereign Peace. At the end of the day, the goal wasn't just to win a lawsuit or publish a book. It was about creating a fortress. It meant securing a protected physical node, known internally as the Broadway Sanctuary, and establishing absolute sovereignty. It's all about ensuring that those carefully crafted archetypes we talked about, like the matriarch and the divine shield, can finally exist in a permanent zero-stress zone. There's a quote from the project's charter that perfectly captures this profoundly restorative mission. The war is over. We are transitioning from a planet of extraction to a planet of preservation. That is exactly what this is all about. The entire massive legal and creative machine was built to clear out the weeds so the future could be planted in total peace. So, I'll leave you with this. It really makes you wonder, right? If this level of structured boundary setting, data partitioning, and AI assistance can transform systemic trauma into literally an unbreachable fortress and an 8-volume literary epic, how could we all better structure our own data, set our own boundaries, and channel our own creative energy to protect our peace? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it gave you some absolutely fascinating ideas for building your own cognitive sovereignty.